Hello everyone and welcome to this episode, the Upskilling One of the Women Talking About Learning podcast. I'm Andrew Jacobs. Upskilling is becoming more and more popular within L&D. I'm hearing it at so many conferences and events. I mentioned it in an article for People magazine in early January, and it's going to be a topic which will, along with reskilling, come up throughout 2025. We wanted to capture some thoughts on this, and we're delighted when our guests agreed to record this episode. Our first guest is Laura Sukorokoff. Laura has always had a passion for soft skills and what they can do to transform business. She's taken this passion and built her own training company, Take Charge Learning, to help employees and their managers connect, communicate, collaborate, and do great work. Laura is an entrepreneur, an author, an inspiring and engaging facilitator, and speaker. Her book, It's Not Them, It's You, Why Employees Break Up with Their Managers and What to Do About It, explores the subject of connection in the workplace. Our second guest is Claire Madeley. With over 25 years of experience in training and development, Claire is not just an expert. She's a force in technology training and digital transformation for the legal sector. Throughout her career, Claire has designed and delivered innovative training programs that are anything but ordinary. Her certified virtual online courses empower teams to navigate the rapidly evolving digital landscape with confidence and flair, ensuring that firms not only keep pace with change, but thrive in it. Recorded in November of 2024, this is Women Talking About Learning. This is Laura and Claire talking about upskilling.
Claire, good morning. Well, I guess it's good afternoon for you. You are, of course, in the UK, and I am in Canada on the West Coast, where it is still, I'm looking out my window, it's still pretty dark out there because it's pretty early in the morning. So, hello, welcome. How are you?
Oh, hello, and thank you, Laura. Lovely to hear from you. Well, here, in the UK, it's a bit dark still, but we're 4:00 in the afternoon, so a bit of a different time zone. So thank you for meeting with me. I'm all good. Although I've got to say, it's that time of year, isn't it? I've got a little bit of a sniffly cold, so thank you for having me here today. I'm not feeling top dollar, as it were. That's children for you, catching their colds.
Oh, yes. Well, I'm through on the other side of that, and we're empty nesters, so I no longer have that as my excuse, but I will tell you that it might be a bit of a slow start for me too, because it is so early in the morning. So the two of us are going to have a really interesting conversation, if maybe just not the most rapid start to it. Let's put it that way. So, and here we are. We're meant to be talking about upskilling in this episode, and I think it's kind of apropos that we're both sort of easing into it, don't you think?
I think it is. Sometimes it's just putting the face on and just trying to show up and just be your best self that you can be, I suppose, at that time. And, don't want to miss an opportunity to discuss such a great topic, actually, as well, because it's dear to my heart, as it is with yours. So anything to do with upskilling and getting people to be the best they can be, I think people struggle with quite a lot. I think that, that whole country does, a lot of firms do.
I love what you just said about being the best, helping people be the best they can be. And I think that is, well, it's something that drives me. And from the L&D people that I've spoken to, I believe that's a fairly common trait amongst us. We really do want people to be great at what they do and to be great at who they are. But what I mean by that is kind of how they're sitting within their roles, how they're feeling about their progress within those roles and within the company and, within their industry. I view it as my role is to help them maximize their potential, if you will. And so in so doing, I maximize my own potential. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm with you as well. It doesn't matter what course we're delivering or, anything along those lines, you always learn something new because it's a different person that's learning something new. So it drives me as well. And I think it's just setting the seeds sometimes for people's curiosity. and feel maybe the confidence to ask a question. I've been in many areas in my little niche, especially to do with tech training, where, to be honest, it can be really dull and boring. And, people don't want to ask a question because they just want to get it done and over with. So setting the seeds of making people feel comfortable and confident enough to have that curiosity, I think it really does help.
hmm Yeah, in our previous conversations, you spoke about this idea of tech training that it can be really boring, and what you're doing to make it a lot more interesting. And when we were talking about this, we talked about the importance of engagement and training. And I don't know, I think that's super. It's needed. You have to have things in your training to make people want to engage, like activities, discussion, whatever they are. And you spoke of some of the ways you add humor into it. I think that's actually appropriate to this topic of upskilling because it really is about learning or relearning. And you have to make it interesting. You have to make it something they want to do. So tell us a little bit more. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you have to get involved.
Yeah.
We can't go back to the talk and chalk. We've got so much around us to support engagement, whether it be face to face, whether it be online, or whatever the way that it's delivered. But getting that involvement and that engagement, and we know that feeds onto so many other things to do with neuroscience and the way we learn, and that's another subject altogether. But it feeds into that. But make it a little bit more humorous. Have fun with your training. And everyone loves having a bit of fun. So with all of the tech training being done, I've also done lots and lots of soft skills training. And so it's been a nice kind of marriage to see that with a little bit of maybe boring tech training, adding a little bit of some soft skills and communication and a little bit of engagement and variety, actually marrying them both up, we're actually delivering an interesting tech session that people want to come along to, and then they're going to be able to upskill because we don't pay attention to anything that's boring. So we're not going to ultimately upskill them if that course is boring.
Yeah. Okay. Can I just mention how much I love that you brought up soft skills? Because as you know, that's my jam. I really enjoy, well, that's what my career is in right now is soft skills training. And so often when we're talking about this topic of upskilling, we're talking more about the hard skills. But honest to goodness, I think just based on the global lack of employee engagement and based on what we see from in-demand skills in the future. I mean, we can talk about AI later, but for right now, what is it? 7 of the top 10 most in-demand skills for now and into the future are soft skills based. And so I have to tell you, I love that because that's me, but I don't know. I just, for me, it's like a super good topic. And we've just seen Andrew put forward a comment in the chat here that the Singaporean renaming of soft skills to critical core skills. Oh my gosh, I love that. I myself have renamed them many times to power skills because I truly believe that's where the power is. But I love that critical core skills.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. They are critical, and even more so in today's world, so fast paced, we're so, technology driven, that if we lose the basic form of communication, and I don't know, influence, and there's so much that we are going to lose. We cannot rely on tech so much. So thinking about the next generation that's going to come up through that workforce, communication skills are a must. They would much prefer, as we know, to perhaps do a voice note in WhatsApp now rather than actually physically speak to someone. So it's very much difference, isn't there, about how we communicate today.
Yeah, and I don't. For me, I think it's really too bad. Even though I'm a soft skills trainer, I mean that's my business, and I should, sort of a weird way, be embracing this idea of there being such a need for it. I'm finding it. I don't know, maybe a little not sad, that's not quite the word, but a little bit disappointing perhaps that we do have to put such an emphasis on the people skills in the workplace. How I don't know how we got so far away from it, but we have.
Mm.
We have gotten away from this. So if we're going to be building skills for the future, and if employers are looking for these sorts of skills like communication, like collaboration and teamwork, like strategic decision making, problem solving, and so on, why aren't we doing more of that within organizations? Why aren't
I
we
couldn't agree with
focusing
you
on
more.
that?
Yeah. And it's a critical skill, and we are missing a critical knowledge to actually have that strategy to move forward and be successful in a company, because we're missing, as you say, it's not a soft skill, it's a critical skill. And if we are diminishing in this, which we are, and we know we are, I mean, there's so many reports out there to suggest all of this, then we need this. But actually getting a voice heard and knowing that this is important, how do we measure it? How's the impact? And we are often, as I'm sure every L&D person out there knows, we are often downtrodden. Can we cut the budget? Can we do this? Can we do without that? And I think that's where we need to think about how we're adding that value and looking and using this and really putting some really good points on the table there, but making people listen.
Mm.
That's
I
my
was
rant
just
over.
thinking, yeah, no, I love it. I love it. And you and I talked about the listening thing when we chatted the other day. And Claire, we agree that listening is such a crucial aspect of communication. Like for my part, I honestly think that listening is probably the biggest thing that we need to learn with regard to communication. And so much of communication learning that's out there, like textbooks and courses, etc., they don't give a whole lot of time to listening. And I think it's crucial. I think if we can't listen well, how can we learn well? How can we speak well? How can we understand others well? I don't think we can. So maybe that's a place where we should focus our learning now for upskilling in the future.
I couldn't agree more. I think listening skills is something that's like it's been as an add-on to communication skills, but it is part of it and it's massive. Even more important than perhaps sometimes the way we say something, we need to listen to the way person's saying something in response. It's really, really interesting. You're thinking about these critical skills, communication, problem solving. It's funny enough, I was speaking to a teacher friend of mine the other day and about actually how we might well be changing that curriculum over time and introducing these critical skills now into our schools, which, if you think about it, kind of really need to be there in the first place, but
Mm.
they are getting back. So we are starting to realize.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So I'm thinking about the way we get, I suppose, listening, we get so distracted by everything. You think about how many distractions you've got around you right at this moment in time. You're listening to me. We're looking at a screen. We're looking at a chat. Maybe we have our phone going off. There might be something in the background. We might get a notification. Is there someone at the door? There's always so many distractions. So it's learning, I suppose, and honing how to, I suppose, filter them out slightly. Concentrate and
We've
focus. I think we're doing that. We can't focus anymore, can we? We're focused on too many things. Sorry, over to you, Laura.
no, yeah, I interrupted. So here, look at me, not listening super well and just trying to get my words in, right? So there you go, folks, listening to this. There's a lesson for you. Let the other person finish speaking and then speak because You know what? It's one of the okay, this is a little segue, but it's one of those hard learning things where you think, okay, this is where the conversation is going. This is what I want to say. I can hardly wait for my moment to say it. And then you try to interrupt, but you back it off. And then the other person says something that takes it in a completely different direction and you miss it because you were so focused in on what you were saying. That right there, folks, is the reason why you shouldn't do it. Just let the
That
other
is
person finish speaking.
hilarious. Because I'm going to think about what you're going to say. If I was talking to my mum right now, she would laugh at me. She said, "Are you always butting, Claire? You're always butting. Do you know what I'm going to say? How do you know what I'm going to say?" So we're all there. None of us are perfect, for sure.
No, exactly. It's true. And so for folks, those of you who are listening out there, just know that we may be teaching this stuff, but we are human as well, and none of us is perfect, as Claire just said. And so if you do happen to do this, well, then, forgive yourself, learn from it, and move on. And back to the whole listening thing, Claire, I've got I have a big communication textbook and it's a relatively recent one. I bought it, at a used bookstore and I thought, okay, this would be interesting to see what is in here that I could maybe use as a reference for communications courses that I'm building. And it is not a book on communications, like for PR or for marketing people. It is a book about communication and university textbook. And in this textbook that is more than 500 pages, excluding the index and the tables of contents and the forwards, like more than 500 pages of actual communication content, I found within it approximately 3/4 of a page of a single page devoted to listening. So when I did a rough calculation, even though I'm a soft skills person, I'm a little bit of a data nerd. So when I did a rough calculation, it came out to something like 0.03%. So less than 1%, far less than 1% of this book was devoted to listening. And I don't know, that just sort of struck me as, those moments where you're like, huh, well, now it makes sense. Anyway, that's what I learned.
But
Have you learned anything about listening to add to this?
there is a great saying that someone once said to me: "We have two ears and one mouth for a reason." And I thought, really, I understand that.
It's so and okay, so I'm thinking I wanna get your take on this because I'm thinking this all ties in with the conversation I just had yesterday. So yesterday I was speaking at an event and I was speaking about, soft skill stuff because that's what I do. I was speaking about making first impressions. And afterward, I spoke with a gentleman who is in sales. Leads a sales team. And he has one team member who's quite young. He's, I think, 27 years old, 26, 27. And this gentleman on his team is really upset that he hasn't yet kind of gone up into the leadership positions. His feeling is that at his age, he should already be in at least a middle level people leadership position. And so this gentleman I was speaking to was asking me for my thoughts, kind of my coaching ideas, I guess, on how he could get this other person to just kind of slow his roll, calm down, be patient without losing him.
Mhm.
And I thought, isn't that an interesting thing as well? So linking that into this idea of communication and listening and developing our skills, I wanted to ask you about your take on people who are in their early to mid 20s who feel like, I don't know, it seems to me like they feel such pressure to be so much further along in their careers certainly than I did at that same age. And I wonder how much of that applies to this idea of upskilling and reskilling and what we need to do as L&D professionals to either help them build their patience, build their focus, or move them faster. What do you think?
Well, yeah. I mean, supporting goals, I think, is fundamental. And if they're not going to be in alignment, then we are going to lose motivation. If they're going to lose motivation because they're not on their trajectory, whatever that may be. And I think things are very much further and quicker paced than perhaps they were in our day when we started out in our work life. And there is so much more pressure, but they want to achieve. They can achieve quicker. But then we haven't actually learned that bit of patience. It's like a little pendulum that swings, isn't it? And it's never quite
Mhm.
balanced perfectly in the middle. We're racing too far ahead, or we are not at all. We're actually just finding that careful balance with a little bit of patience, guidance, goal setting, making sure that they're there to be achievable for them and monitoring them and making sure that they feel motivated to get them. And we're thinking about all of the sort of upskilling, and just thinking about a course that used to run quite a bit, and making sure that those goals are defined, but checking in, I think, with them as well. But here again, we're coming back to, when we're talking about upskilling, you stand about, perhaps we wouldn't want to lose them. And when we just think about how often the younger generation will change jobs, and we're losing a lot of skills and then have to upskill again. And that is an interesting thing that's happening right now. And a lot of time, effort, and ultimately money is being spent on the upskilling of new hires within a role before they actually even get to their optimum. So there's a lot of questions around that, isn't there?
I just wrote down a few notes on what you said, and I wanted to first start on what you had said, Claire, about setting goals and monitoring their progress, and then managing their expectations as well. I think that's a really important thing. Whether we're talking about upskilling or whether we're talking about just them on their performance path within the organization that we have gotten accustomed to as of now. When you've got people, we in L&D know this stuff, that what we do, this idea of helping people improve and to grow, is super duper important to them. Like it is such a motivational factor to find a workplace that invests in your development. But we also know that people don't do what they know they should do. They do what they've always done. And so if we don't have that interest and that reinforcement from their managers, honestly, it falls on the managers to help keep this going. If we don't have that, then we risk all our development efforts falling flat. So I think that was a really important thing, what you said, this idea of setting the goals, setting them on that path to it, monitoring their progress, and having support and guidance be part of that plan, and then managing their expectations. Should they be at a certain point? And if they're not, how do we get them there? But also the other side, which is if they think that they should be so much further along, maybe we're doing them a bit of a favor by saying, no, here are the steps that you need to go. I think that's maybe one of the things that is happening with communication today, because we have so much information at our fingertips. We are maybe more inclined to skip the steps or think that we can skip the steps. I don't know. That's just a thought. And then when you talked about upskilling new hires, so that's a thing. Like you and I are both in L&D, but what I know, there's so many businesses out there, like so many, and a great many of them don't have very robust learning and development programs, if they even have learning and development programs. So that's one thing. I think a lot of people are expecting to hire people that already have the knowledge. And this becomes a bit of a problem, right? So if somebody gets hired in a company and then they learn in that company and then they can get a better job offer in another company based on what they have learned in the previous company, that makes it a bit of a challenging cycle for everybody. There's a productivity lull there.
I think there's I put a little bit down about a course that was talking about the person that really wanted to, get further in their career. They were getting frustrated. They weren't getting there as quick enough. And it just reminded me of a course I taught years ago, Blanchard Self-Leadership. And it was such an empowering course for that person to actually own their own leadership development. And the onus was on them and how they communicated. And it was a fabulous course because it's up to that person to say, this is what I want to do. Can I get here? And then ask the right questions to actually achieve it. And a lot of the course as well was about, have I overstretched? Am I saying that I have this skill when I really don't? And I remember it was a fantastic course to actually motivate and give the ownership slightly back to that person so they feel like they're in control, not waiting for my annual review, for instance, to know that I'm on the right track. Go ahead and then having that, as we say, back to confidence and communication skills to say, oh, hold on, can I just have a quick moment? I just want to check, or I've done this. Can I have another thing to actually get me towards my goal? And so, yeah, it was a fabulous course, actually. And oh gosh, I'm trying to think of the name now. I'm sure maybe someone else does as well know the course. But it was all to do with, self-leadership. But then Blanchard did a couple of other things, if I remember rightly.
I think maybe that's one of those things that whoever's listening to us maybe needs to take into account is, do our L&D programs, do we as L&D professionals need to push things forward to companies a little bit more? Or do we need to be encouraging people to do self-learning? I don't know which is which. There's a lot of learning available out there. So if people want to self-learn, they can. But one of the challenges is so many people don't. So this is something that needs to be worked out with organizations, and maybe L&D professionals need to push it a bit more. But I have to tell you, I don't think we can have a conversation about upskilling without talking about AI. Like, I'm pretty sure that everybody who's listening is going to wonder about AI at least a little bit. So, Claire, I think we need to talk about AI for a couple of minutes. But before we do that, I also would like to put forward this idea of upskilling versus reskilling. And I'm putting a resource into the chat so you can see what I'm talking about. It's just a LinkedIn learning resource, but I thought it defined it quite well. The long and short of it is that upskilling is expanding an existing skill set, whereas reskilling is taking on completely new skills. So that might be appropriate in this rapidly transitioning time of AI coming in. We know that a lot of people are going to be losing their jobs because it is what it is. It's a rapid transformation time. So what that may mean is we need to have a lot of people reskilled. And organizations can maybe do quite a substantial amount of that within, like, in-house. If you have a great employee, do you really want to lose them just because they don't have the immediate skill set? Can we employ L&D to reskill?
Great question. And this is where we really do need, in the learning and development field, to actually learn how to benchmark all those transferable skills. And think about how many people have so many different skills that could equally be transferred to a different role that they find interesting, or even more interesting sometimes. So how does that company know what transferable skills that particular person has? It could even be something they're passionate about on the outside as a hobby, for instance. We don't know. So having that knowledge can then aid and help all of the skills that we might be able to, we need.
When we spoke before, Claire, I mentioned that the statistics were quite shocking. Companies are making massive investments in AI, but the adoption rate has been very, very low. So there's trillions of dollars being invested in AI, with organizations are literally spending billions, but yet the uptick is about 5%. And so that makes me think, why? And what do we need to do to help change the mindset toward adoption? Because we know people won't do what they know they should do. As I said before, they're going to do what they've always done. And so how do we then make them shift that? How do we manage that change transition? And what you said is, what skills do they have? If we can start getting to know our people more and understanding a little bit more deeply who they are and what interests them, we may find that they have skills that can transition over, but we may also find that we can tap into their interests to help them see the value in making that transition. So, as you know, I see a comment in the chat about how we rarely understand how to baseline, benchmark, and define the requirement. So, we need, as organizations, we need to be better at how we strategize what we're looking for. If we're making investments in AI and we want our team to adopt it, we need to be better at defining the strategic value of it, translating it into the various roles within the organization, and then helping people create a plan to work within it to get up to productivity. AI can be a huge boost in productivity. Claire, do you use AI elements at all in the work you do?
Yeah, of course. We use Copilot quite a lot,
Mhm.
and I've used it, chat functions and various things over the time, and I absolutely love it. But going back to when this was first launched, what, a couple of years is it already? Gosh, a couple of years ago when it first sort of came out, I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, I remember sending my daughter a message saying, look at this. Oh my gosh, do not ever cheat with your homework. There will be things that you can write through, and that AI is going to know that teacher's going to know if you used AI to do your homework. That was the first thing that crossed my mind, because as a teenager, I would have probably done something like that. And then that set my seed for thinking, well, then how could we actually use that? And then it is very much of just getting some ideas. It's like what they say, it's like your personal assistant. Let's brainstorm between me and you, Laura. And I can brainstorm between that and Copilot and come up with some loads of juicy ideas about where to start. And I think that's where the value is. But you're absolutely right. It's going to be, I think AI is going to be messy. It's going to be that perfect imperfection. It reminds me when the internet was first launched. It reminds me of going from a dial-up modem, and all of a sudden now we don't have to use that dial-up modem anymore. And I remember it was just painful. But that's the thing. There's going to be pain points, isn't there, along that process? And I think we're all a bit flapping around in the water. We don't know what's going to happen just yet, really. But yes, it is happening. We don't know where it's going to be. And there's so many questions I think we and everyone else have around it. But it is when we get something in place, it is then maybe that people with the fear as well of how are we going to upskill maybe our sort of generation that are not used to tech as much as the new generation that are coming into the workforce, the younger generation. And it takes me back to thinking about, how I had to teach my mum how to use the video recorder when I was a teenager. So I think intergenerational learning would be beneficial. I always see my daughter with my mum, teaching her how to do something on the phone. Can we tap in to all those different areas and broaden our horizons about who can we learn from and who can support that learning?
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Do you know, I just also, as you were saying that, I circled what you had said before about knowing what skills they have. So it could be even outside of the little box of their job description, right? Can we tap into other skills that they have to help them, one, share their knowledge, and two, broaden their own experience within their role, right? They might enjoy doing this. And three, determine what they have that we can use as an organization to bring them along and bring our organization along. I also want to talk about the older generation, just unless those people think that they can be complacent and ride it out till, and I'm talking like by the older generation, I don't mean octogenarians. I mean people who are maybe moving into the tail ends of their careers. And those people, unless they think that they can just cruise to retirement without having to worry about AI, they need to understand that this is a very rapid change. And by 2027, which is only 2 years away, they're going to need to, they're going to be using this stuff. So they either adapt or they look at early retirement. So that's one lesson. The other thing I would like to have your opinion on, Claire, is L&D's responsibility here. So I'm talking a lot about organization strategic points of view and how they need to understand what decisions they're making and being transparent. But what about L&D? I personally believe that our function needs to drive this. We need to be going to organizational leaders and saying, this is an imperative. If you're making this kind of investment in your company's resources, the biggest resource you have, your employees, needs to fully understand how to take advantage of it to make your investment pay off. So we need to be in there, adding our opinions with the executives and how we can help. But also, even before we do that, we in L&D, we need to be bringing our own skills up to snuff. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you are spot on. And we, the firm I'm currently with, we will not let people use, for instance, some AI without actually giving them the training they need to know and feel confident and comfortable using it. There is that element, and it can't just give a bit of software to someone and think they know how to use it. Yes, a lot of things are so much more intuitive nowadays. Of course they are. But to get the best out of something, and it doesn't have to be that difficult, but it's just knowing how to use it to its best effect. So there's going to be a skills gap. There needs to be an analysis done about that. And we need to breed the confidence in people that, that change is going to happen. And there's always going to be people that are pushing back on that. But we're not expecting, I think, perfection anywhere. I think maybe the perfect imperfection is what we're after, because it is going to be a bit messy, but that's okay. As long as we go a little bit by little bit in the right direction, then I think we're on to a winner. But we certainly do need to get certainly leadership much more on board so we can upskill people to feel comfortable and confident, especially within AI.
Yeah. So if I were to give any advice to my L&D colleagues out there that are listening, that would be one of the places that I would start, is firstly putting forward that conversation with leadership. Say, okay, there's a great deal of investment in these different tools, AI being amongst them. There's a great deal of investment in these productivity tools and these rapidly transitioning tools. L&D needs to be part of that conversation of how it's going to roll out to the organization. So that would be my first bit of advice to L&D professionals, is to get yourself somehow in that conversation. If you already have a seat at the executive table because you have a CHRO, good on you. But I don't think most organizations have that kind of executive role. So find a way to make your voice heard, put forward a proposal, ask for meetings, express the interest in it, but also within that, have the data to back you up, have that information. So do some research, learn what you need to know about what's happening with AI in this particular conversation, but really in general, with these things outside of your organization and just in the industry in general, but also how is it rolling out within your organization? So do some research, find out what you need to find out, and then put forward a well thought out proposal of how L&D can help the rollout within the organization. I think that's a very important first step. But alongside of that, maybe not 2.0, but steps number 1.1 is also making sure that we in L&D, that we know what we're talking about. So we need to invest in our own learning, whatever that looks like. I do a lot of research using the interwebs. I use AI to help me comb through AI-based articles to pull out things that I need. And so we also in L&D need to have an interest in learning. We need to bring ourselves up to speed. We need to be constantly upskilling ourselves. But we also need to have what you said so well. We need to have that own confidence in ourselves if we're going to instill that confidence in others. So those are my 2 words of advice. Just get yourself in that conversation and then make sure that you yourself are ready for the conversation, for the rollout. What about you, Claire? What do you have as takeaways?
Yeah, I think we are going to be there. We are going to need to embrace this innovation, and it's going to be a squiggle to get there. But that squiggle's got to include about who you communicate it to get that involvement. And I'm hearing many, many people were thinking that Copilot falls under their technology department and things like that. It necessarily doesn't. This is something that we all are going to need to know as if we just even think about it as a blanket, how are we going to use the internet? We can put it back and put it into tiny little nuggets of what we can use, but we need involvement and we need to get everyone else aware of what I suppose we can bring to the table to help people learn, whether it be a piece of software, whether it be AI, whether it be about communicating. So I think it's just making sure that we're embracing people as much as possible. And and as I said, nothing's ever perfect. So that perfect imperfection is good enough.
I think that's a great place for us to end on. Claire, I love chatting with you. Thanks for spending some time with me today.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure, isn't it? It's been really nice to speak with you, Laura. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you. And hey, Andrew, are you hovering around the conversation? Thank you as well.
As with pretty much everything in L&D right now, AI appeared within this conversation. I was really taken by how Laura and Claire were open about it and how we need to embrace it. It was great to get their views on more than just this. And we really want to thank Laura and Claire for their time and contribution. You can, as always, find their details in the show notes, along with their contact information, etc. Make sure you mention Women Talking About Learning when you connect with them. It's really satisfying for the guests to know that people have listened to them. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, please do let us know. All the details, along with our website and how you can donate to Women Talking About Learning, are in the show notes. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, and next time it's the Profit One. As always, thanks for listening, and we'll see you again soon.